Hi, I'm Sam, and I met Betsy Ross in the 1700s because we went back in time with our classroom. And Betsy Ross made the American flag, and that's what she's famous for. So, I encourage you to go back in time and maybe meet her yourself. So I made the brochure for her right here. Okay, so sewing the American flag. Betsy was in her upholstery shop when in came George Washington, the leader of the Continental Army. He came in with two other men. One was a relative of her old husband named John Ross. They gave her a piece of paper showing the general idea of how they want the flag to look. In that design was a six-sided star. Betsy was a professional sewer and knew making a five-sided star was easier to make, so she told George Washington her thoughts. She also said it would look better. She gave him a sample by cutting a piece of paper into a five-sided star, and he eventually agreed. She started working on the flag, and then a while later, when she was finished, George arrived once again. He was pleased with her work, thanked her, and left. Would you do what she did, and would you be up for the challenge of making our American flag? I know I wouldn't. I'd mess up. And then have you heard of Betsy Ross? If you haven't or just want to learn new facts about her, then come back in time and meet her for yourself. Betsy Ross sewed the first American flag for our country. You might think that was her only accomplishment, but it wasn't. Even though they weren't what made her famous, they were still hard to do and hard on her. Here's one of her achievements. Over time, Betsy Ross had 3 husbands, and every one of them died. And she had to care for her 5 kids and several grandchildren. Despite being heartbroken and having to supply food and water for along with shelter for the kids, she still kept her business going, and it was successful. So, hear the story of Betsy Ross in her own words, and not just like on a computer screen online, or with this. Okay, meet her family. Betsy's family moved to New Jersey and to Pennsylvania when Betsy was 3. Her father, was a carpenter, and life must have been hard for him and his wife because they had 17 kids, including Betsy. When Betsy was growing up, she learned to sew. That helped her later in life when she married John Ross and became an upholsterer. Betsy's husbands were John Ross, Joseph Ashburn, and John Claypool. Joseph Ashburn and She met and married John Ross. When she was married to Joseph Ashburn, she had a daughter named Zillah. Zillah died when Joseph was in the military prison in Britain. Helping out soldiers. Since all of her husbands died from the Revolutionary War in some way, whether it was from dying in a prison or dying from a gunpowder accident, they all somehow died from the war. And so she decided to help out. She also obviously was a patriot, otherwise she wouldn't have sewn our flag. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find this. She decided to help by mending our uniforms and tents for our soldiers. I even heard that she sewed buttons on George Washington's clothes before the war. So come back in time and help Betsy make uniforms and other military supplies. Hear about Betsy and Ross and George Washington. Before the war, Betsy knew George Washington from church. He was also a frequent customer in her store. So hear about the good times they had before the war. Think of questions you would want to ask her. If you do meet her and you don't know what to say, then let her do the talking and hear about her interesting life. Okay, here's a reward I gave her, a medal. For sewing the very first American flag for the USA. And then she has, okay, I'll just do the letter. A letter to her husband, Joseph Ashburn, because he was in prison. So this is how it starts. To my beloved husband, Joseph Ashburn, I am writing this letter to inform you of our daughter Zillah's death. Even though she only lived 9 short months, I would do anything to have her back. Although I have been grieving for Zilla, there's news. We have a new baby. There's good news. We have a new baby. I decided to name her Eliza. It will be hard to care for a baby and run the upholstery business, too. Without you, you're helping me. I hope you are released from prison soon so that you can get back to America and meet Eliza for the first time. I hope that you are not being treated too badly. I need help. I cannot continue to do it all myself. Try to write back, and I'll try to write more often. Your loving wife, Betsy Ashburn. I wrote a poem about her when I was meeting her. Beyond determined, it's an acrostic poem for Betsy Ross, and beyond determined to support her family, extremely proud because she sewed our nation's flag, tired because of how she has to work to make a tired because of how she has to work to make a living with all her kids and stuff. Sad because her 3 husbands and 2 children died before her. Learn everything she could about upholstery. Retired at age 76, obligated to care for her disabled husband, niece, and 5 grandchildren. She was a great role model for women then, and she still is now. And she wasn't as boring as I thought she would be. Here's a summary of Betsy Ross, and here I go. Betsy moved from New Jersey to Pennsylvania with her large family. When she finished school, she became an upholsterer apprentice. That's where she met her first husband, John Ross. He had died 2 years later. They had no children. After John died, Betsy kept the upholstery business going to support herself. She made extra money by making military supplies like tents, blankets, and uniforms. And her famous flag for the Continental Army. Betsy's life was sad and tough because of her second husband was in prison in England. Their first child, Zilla, died at 9 months old, and around the same time she had her second daughter Eliza, who her husband would never meet because he died in the prison. Finally, she married John Claypool, and after he came to inform her about the death of Joseph Ashburn. They had 5 children, but one died young. Later, she had to raise her niece and help with her daughter's kids too, and care for her husband, who was disabled from the war, from old war injuries. I don't even know. She did this by continuing with the upholstery business. Years later, John Claypool died, and Betsy retired at age 76. Betsy moved to the countryside with her daughter and died at age 84. And here are some things that she would have in her backpack. She would have a Bible, the idea that George Washington wanted for their flag, some money for making the flag, a letter from her husband in prison, probably some string because she was an upholsterer and a sewer. She would have milk for the babies because she had a lot of them. She would have a hammer to work on with her upholstery business. And she would have a quill to write to her husband in prison. And I can't find them in here, but there was nails also for her upholstery business because she needed to help make furniture. That is it, and I strongly encourage you to go visit Betsy Ross and ask yourself.